This is an open letter to Mr. Ron DeSantis. It came to my attention recently that there was a law passed, or there was a argument was made, and a lot of people approved of that argument, that law. I'm not sure if it has passed already or not. And the idea was, we don't want to, the law, the idea, whatever it was, that has got widespread approval amongst your people in the legislature and in the executive branch of the state of Florida. It was widespread approval about this idea that let's not teach those parts of history that will make our children feel bad, will make white children in the classrooms feel bad. We should not teach those parts of the history that causes, makes our children feel sad or depressed, or that's bad, and they might not, like themselves. But after a while, because it's it's the history connected to their European forefathers. And your idea and your people's idea was, let's not teach those parts that we don't care for, that makes our children feel bad. I mean, where to start? Where to start? I mean, starting from phrases, proverbs that has been repeated many times from all corners of the world, that wise men have said, in order to not repeat history, you have to read history, you have to know thy history. Something in around those lines. It has been repeated over and over by multiple wise men from all corners of this planet. And the whole idea that, okay, because it's going to make our children feel bad, we're not going to talk about it. It's sort of like the Germans saying that because the Holocaust that we committed against the Jews is so bad, it was so bad, and it will make our children definitely feel bad, so we're not going to teach about Holocaust that took place in 20th century. It's on that level. It's sort of like, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, the Holocaust happened, 5 million people of Jewish faith were perished during the Holocaust. But let's remember that 110 million, by some estimates, 110 million Redskins just perished in North America alone when the Europeans came over, when your forefathers came over. So why is it that the Germans have to teach their kids about the Holocaust, but you don't have to teach your kids about the Redskin genocide that took place? They fought tooth and nail to hold on to their land, but they lost. So what part of this is you don't want to teach? I mean, in order for your children not to repeat these mistakes, they have to learn about their grandfather's mistakes. In order not to repeat the mistakes, in order for your next generation not to repeat mistakes, not to have to re-experiment, they have to know about, you have to tell them about their grandfather's mistakes, doing the same thing, the same experiments. It's as simple as that. It's just... So let's not teach about the Holocaust in Europe, about the German Holocaust. So let's not teach about, because we are not teaching about the Redskin Holocaust. We are not teaching about the black skin of Australia Holocaust, which at least 200 to 500,000 people perished. Let's not talk about the African Holocaust, in which Europeans went over, and just in one territory in Congo, 10 million of people of black skins of that territory were killed just by the Belgians. Belgians, just by them. It's like 150 million Indians were killed by the British, by different kinds of shows that the British played over there, brought about famines and all of that. Many they just chopped them up. So let's not teach. So you want your children and your grandchildren to repeat the same mistakes as your grandfathers, or what? I mean, I'm assuming I'm assuming that you also, as a logical man, think that knowing about something bad is better than experiencing that same something bad. Knowing about something bad is better than experiencing it bad. Something bad. I mean, knowing that so many people were killed in Vietnam is better than actually going over there and killing in Iraq and Afghanistan. And please don't make any mistake about it, that if the generation of George W. Bush and younger generations than him, everyone had learned the true causes of Vietnam War, the whole Gulf of Tonkin issue, the whole idea that the local natives really didn't want to go to war, but they were forced into war. If your children learn about that, if your generation and generation before you and generation younger than you have learned all of this, maybe Mr. Bush would not, and Cheney and the whole gang would not have been able, even if they wanted to, if the public opinion was so stiff, by knowing what happened in Vietnam, in Laos, in Cambodia, in Panama, by knowing a lot of the truths that we know today, but it's not being taught to your kids in history class, by knowing a lot of those truths, a lot of these later on mistakes would not happen. Even if the whole gang up at the top wants to do it, it will not happen, because people know. Public opinion is would be stiffly against it, because the public are informed, because the public is informed. I'm thinking that even if George W. Bush and Mr. Cheney actually, they themselves, Mr. Rumsfeld and Mrs. Rice and all of them, if they actually knew, they actually had really studied about the past wars brought about by Uncle Sam's managers, aggressive wars, they would have, by reading about them, learning about them in history class, they probably would not have been so much pro-war. To, go into Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Central America, South Asia, Central Asia, North Africa, South Africa. Here's the thing, Mr. DeSantis. If you agree with all of these that has taken place, unjust and misadventures that different managers of Uncle Sam's business has taken America down the path to, if you think these were not mistakes, then we have a different problem. We have a different issue. But if you think these paths were wrong, then your kids have to learn about the wrong paths that have previously been taken. By learning history, you learn which paths do not result into an answer, which paths don't reach the destination. That's how you learn, by see which path my ancestors, my grandfather's generation, my great grandfather's generation, before that, those generation, these paths, they went down this path, this path, this path, this path, this path, and they were all wrong. So I'm not going to try those paths again. It's this learning about history is as simple as that. You learn which paths don't give an answer, don't lead nowhere. So at least if you make any mistakes, there are going to be new mistakes, not old mistakes. What part of this is hard for, you know, hard to understand? I don't understand, because, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, your idea is a very short-term fix. The idea that our children should not learn the true history. It's a short fix. Because now it doesn't result into a problem, but later on they get into some of the same wars. They vote for some of the same wars. They allow some of the same wars and fuck-ups and mess-ups to take place. And they themselves suffer because of it. Sort of like, it's like having a firearms in the house, but thinking to yourself that I'm not going to teach my children all the bad things that can happen with this gun, because I don't want to scare them. I don't want to, you know, make them fearful. I don't want to make them feel bad. So I'm not going to teach them how dangerous this gun is. Does that make sense? No. You guys always recommend that anybody who keeps firearms in their house should teach their kids about them. Describe that, you know, a bullet from this can, you know, splatter your brain all over the wall, by explaining to that, although the kid is not going to feel bad about it, may have a couple of nightmares about it, but at least the kid knows that not to experience it. And isn't that the point? Not to experience something bad, but just learn about it? What part of this is, I don't understand. It's like, what part of this is difficult for you guys to, I mean, you're going for a very short-term fix. Yeah, our kids gonna feel bad, so we're not going to teach them. Oh, it's short-term fix, and long-term they're going to make the same mistakes. Because they've never been taught. Or, here's the thing. Salute. If you don't teach them true history, you know where they're going to learn history from? They're going to learn history from Hollywood. They're going to learn history from Hollywood. And the problem with learning history from Hollywood is that, you know, fact and fiction gets jumbled up in people's brains. And a lot of times a lost war, like the Vietnam, with a couple of Rambo movies, turns into a one war. A happy ending, a one war, and then people actually don't learn the lesson of the lost war. And here's the thing about Vietnam War. I'm not sure how you guys, why I hear a lot of times that you guys describe Vietnam War as a lost war, or Afghanistan as a lost war. I'm not sure what a one Vietnam or a one Afghanistan would have looked like. And if you look at Vietnam today, and you see it's very modern and they have built Vietnam very well, although they lost the war, you consider it as a lost war. So if the Vietnamese won the war, and they have 50 years later, they have built their country so well, then what was the war about? I mean, the idea is we are the good guys, they're the bad guys. We are going over there to show them how to do things correctly. But then you pull back, and then they do their own way, and they're successful at the end. The end result is great, positive. then how you justify your intervention in Vietnam? And what would have a one scenario would have looked like in Vietnam? And another North South Korea, let's draw the line, and this side is ours and that side is yours. It, is half of Korea is suffering because you drew the line over on the sand. I don't understand. And Vietnam is a prime example that you say our system could only work, but they applied their system after you pulled out. They applied their system, and their system also worked. So what was the war about? And like 2, 3, 4, 5 million Vietnamese died, and 50,000 Americans. Why? 60, 58,000. Why? Isn't this what the kids in order to not make the same mistake? Isn't this what your kids should learn in school, in history class, at middle school level? I mean, they say history repeats itself. Yeah, but only if you don't read it, if you don't learn from it. At least make new mistakes. When you read history, at least you make new mistakes, not the old mistakes. What is a win in Afghanistan would have looked like? What, Afghanistan would have become a 51st American state? Or, I mean, poor Puerto Rico has been standing in line for, what, 50 years now? And you don't give him permission to be the 51st state. What would have a win in Afghanistan look like? 51st state, a new territory. What? Or permanent, a piece of territory are under permanent military control, like in military control of the Europeans or descendants of Europeans, white people. A permanent piece of territory that's under permanent control of the white people on the other side of the planet, like Israel, like Afghanistan, like Syria now, like Iraq. I mean, you do understand, folks. You understand that the local people are suffering over there. They really didn't want any interventions. They were happy. If not happy, at least they were alive. Many of them safe. It's like half the minorities in Iraq died during your intervention by the hands of their neighbors, because it's a shithole. If they don't fear the leader, they've cut their neighbor's throat. What part of this? I mean, who researched Iraq before invading Iraq? Who said it's a good idea? How many people in Bush administration had lived in Iraq, have studied the history of Iraq, have done anything? It's like just flying by the seat of your pants and without knowing anything about history of anywhere. We don't need to know shit. We got some big guns and we're gonna empty our big guns. Hopefully we win. If we don't win, then we pull back. But our gun is empty. And you wonder why the rest of the world bits of Snickers at Americans. The rest of the world, in front of you, behind you, they snicker at Americans of mostly because of lack of knowledge, lack of self-awareness of that Americans show when they travel. When Americans travel to Europe, to Asia, to Africa, South America, wherever Americans travel, they're a little snickered at by the local population, and the main reason is people of the rest of the planet, after coming into contact with a lot of Americans, they find out that Americans don't know much, are totally unaware, aware of their surroundings, their history, their place on the planet, how, when, where, what happened. Not only that, they're also total, not even self-aware of where they are now. Not forget about what happened in the past, where they are now. What's going on around them in reality in other parts of this planet, except the fear that the media keeps spreading against everybody outside of America. That's unfortunate. I love America. I love Uncle Sam, but it's just this media keeps spreading fear about the rest of the planet. It's like we have to be careful with them, then we have to be careful with them, then we have to be careful with them and them and them and them. Those motherfuckers are bad, those motherfuckers are bad, 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 bad. It was sort of like about a year ago, it was Russia that suddenly became bad. Now it's China bad. Then it was China bad. Then it was now it's Brazil bad. Slowly going to South Africa bad. Especially these BRIC countries, bad, 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 bad. And eventually India bad. Eventually Iran was bad. Venezuela bad. I mean, it's just, and unfortunately, many people buy this inside Uncle Sam's land because they haven't been taught history. They don't know much. What happened? It was the Revolutionary War, and then the flag, and then the Liberty Bell, and then Reagan. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't really depend on Hollywood to teach your children history, because they're not very good at teaching. They're just entertainment. But people, when they're not taught the correct history, what happened and who's responsible, and they only see Hollywood movies, it's just they really don't get it. Don't learn the lessons that should be learned from the past mistakes. If they don't know it, they don't learn the lesson. If they don't learn the lesson, they repeat. What part of this is hard for you guys to understand? You really want your children to repeat the mistakes of their grandfathers? The same mistakes? I mean, I was thinking the only reason that you say it would be justifiable to say that yes, no, my children don't need to learn about the bad things that happened in our history, in the history of his forefathers. That the only way that is justifiable is if you're leaving the planet, you're going off planet Earth. It's like, okay, I'm getting into this starship with my family and my children, and we're going to Mars, and we're going to live there for the rest of our lives. So my family doesn't need to know the history of Earth. We are just going to teach them to do the right thing over there, and this is a different planet. We're not going to be on it. we're going to be over there, and my children don't need to know about the history of Earth. Okay, that's fine. But of course, you can't say really that's fine, because uh, I understand you're a nerd yourself, Mr. DeSantis. You read a lot. That's a good thing, I guess. But I'm not sure why you made this conclusion that your children shouldn't read a lot, especially history. I think history is the most important subject in school. History has to be the most important subject in school. It, above math, above science, above everything. Because history is the one that actually gives you, tells you what paths have been taken. I'm repeating myself. You should not take those paths because they did not lead to a good place. This is the most important subject, should be considered the most important subject in school. The vast, the biggest books in school. The history should be taught from grade 1 to grade 12, because it's the most important thing. Knowing exactly what happened in the past is at least cuts down for a generation, for a society. It cuts down on 80% of their mistakes, because it comes to mind that this path has been taken and it didn't lead nowhere. But you're saying that no, we are going to even diminish a little history that we do teach. We're going to diminish that as well. Why just an African American month? Why just Black History Month? Asian History Month? South American History Month? Central American History Month? Western European History Month? Eastern European History Month? You got 12 months a year. You can fill it up instead of trying to get rid of some of the history. Fill it up with Australian History Month. Let the kids know that during that month how many Australians were eliminated by Europeans, to open the land for settlers. The same thing that is happening in West Asia now. The same thing that happened in East Americas. Eliminate the local populations to make room for the settlers, European settlers. I'm sorry, but you got to fill 12 months with this history, so it would not be repeated again. I said something about going off planet. I understand. I'm thinking if you like to read, you're a bit nerdish like me, so you have probably watched a lot of Star Trek. If you haven't, I'm sure you have some nerds in your surroundings. They can look up this episode that I'm going to mention here. There's an episode of Star Trek that the woman is the captain, and in one of those episodes there's this idea that there is this planet that has a monument for the memory of a war massacre that had taken place in that spot, in that area, on that planet. The planet is uninhabited at the moment. At the moment that these these in Star Trek these people reach the planet, the inhabitants of the planet are long gone. Who knows what happened to their civilization? None of them remain. It's a fictitious story, as all Star Trek is. But the point is this: as they pass by this monument transfers but through virtual reality transfers a few of these one of these members of Star Trek, one of these guys is transferred through virtual reality to the war and the massacre that had taken place in that spot on that planet, in order for this man to participate involuntarily, but he had to participate involuntarily. He had to participate through that virtual reality that suddenly took his mind. He had to virtually participate in that war and in that massacre. And the point of the builders of such a monument was that telling about their history is not enough. Telling about the massacre and the bad things that happened on that spot, on that planet, is not enough. Telling is not enough. Writing about it is not enough. We are going to make a virtual reality out of it, and we are going to forcibly take the passers-by's consciousness, push this consciousness into a virtual reality, and have them experience participating in that massacre, so they learn not to make the mistake that we made. No, here's the thing. This is fictitious, but isn't that's it? Going to the point, it's not too far from imagination that one civilization goes to the point, reaches the point that not only we're going to write about it and have our children read about it forever, so they wouldn't repeat this mistake, but also we're going to teach other people by forcing them to learn what shit we did here, so they wouldn't commit these mistakes in their own planet, in their own world, in their own life. What part of this is hard to understand? That unless you teach your kids about the bad things that took place, maybe at your forefathers' hand, maybe at the hands of somebody else's forefathers. But as long as you teach your kids what happened, there is a chance they won't repeat it again. Because yeah, they're going to feel bad about it, and that feeling bad about it is going to be a memory. Memories are built based on emotions. Things that don't stimulate your emotions, whatever emotions, love, hate, courage, revolt, disgust, whatever emotions, memories, those memories stick with people that invoke some kind of emotions. Everyday stuff doesn't stay in your memory because it doesn't evoke your emotions. But when you hear a bad news, it sticks in your memory because it evokes an emotion. And that's learning in history in class. That's what it's all about. You read it, it invokes emotions, you remember it, you don't repeat it as a society or individually.